The Saints and the Falcons are going to renew their rivalry this weekend in Atlanta. It's going to be a little complicated, though, due to injuries. Can the Saints navigate their way around it? We'll talk about that right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome back inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosvoglu, and as always, we're brought to you by Scott Fickner Injury Lawyers. Have you been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, or hurt offshore? Scott Fickner handles it all. You give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. It is officially Falcons hate week for us Saints fans. One of the most wonderful time of the year, and probably one of the more important games that's going to be on the schedule this entire year for the Saints. And I know it's only week 4, but I really feel like that is the case, and there's so many reasons for it. So we'll talk about it throughout this show. And as always, guys, as we do for every live stream, make sure if you have any comments, thoughts, predictions, concerns, anything regarding the Saints, put them into the chat, and we'll get your comments up in just a little bit so you can have your voice be heard. So get that in there. And also, if you guys enjoy our content, make sure to subscribe and like the video. It definitely helps out the channel, and we greatly appreciate it. So let's jump into our week 4 preview, Saints versus Falcons. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, it's going to be a little complicated this week because injuries, they are stacking up for the New Orleans Saints. And that is one thing that absolutely stinks. I always say injuries are the thief of joy when it comes to football. And for New Orleans, we heard earlier this week, and we talked about it in a recent video, Erik McCoy, groin injury, you already know he's going to be down. So you don't have your best offensive lineman. That alone is already a negative for the Saints. But he's not the only offensive lineman dealing with injuries. Cesar Ruiz right now hasn't practiced this week due to knee injury. You have A.T. Perry, who missed practice with a hamstring injury. Alvin's been limited with a rib and hip injury. Demario Davis hasn't practiced due to hamstring. And then Cedric Wilson hurts his ankle today in practice, listed as limited. So Saints injury report is stacking up. Now, injuries are a part of the game. And frankly, on the other side of the ball, the Falcons are also injured right now. They lost Drew Dahlman, their center. He's on IR. And then Caleb McGarry, their right tackle. I have it listed down here. He hasn't practiced the last 2 days because of a knee injury. He left Sunday night early. So the Saints and the Falcons, not saying it's exactly equal, but they're both probably going to be down 2 starting offensive linemen for this game. And so that's kind of like a wash in that regard. For the Saints, though, I think a lot of this game might come down to the availability of someone like Alvin. I'm not anticipating Demario Davis to play. He's missed the last 2 practices. The Saints need him for the long haul. You paid Pete Werner, and you added Willie Gay this offseason. You paid Pete Werner a lot of money. This is a type of game where he's going to have to step up and be that guy. You brought Willie Gay in because you like the depth that he brings, and you saw with the Chiefs when his number was called, he always stepped up. So this is a great opportunity for him here. So I'm not expecting Demario to play. Cesar Ruiz, I don't expect him to play. Obviously, McCoy is on IR, so you don't have him. I think it really comes down to Alvin. And what I want to say about Alvin before I get into the next part of our show, I want to throw in that for Alvin, the way he has handled this season shows what a true leader he is. A lot of guys at this stage in their career, when they're playing in the most physical position in football at running back, and they're in a contract year, they might decide to hold out. They might decide, hey, you know what? I'm a little banged up. I don't need to play right now. And Alvin's fighting through injuries. Alvin's being a leader the Saints need on and off the field. And I just want to give him that shout out. Not that he needs to hear it from someone like me. I'm in the grand scheme of things, my words about Alvin don't really matter much, but I do think he deserves a lot of praise for the way he's handled this season so far. Obviously, the production on the field has been tremendous, but just showing guys how to be great leaders and handle their situations. Now, I'm always pro players getting their money, especially in the NFL. Get your money while you can. But the way Alvin's handled it, you don't see it often, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for being the leader he is. So Saints are a little banged up right now, and I think this puts them in a situation where I think this game is going to lean heavily on how does the makeshift offensive line look. You know that your tackle is going to be the same in Fuaga and Penning. Do you go with Lucas Patrick at center, and then your guards are some mix of Oli Udoh, Landon Young, and Nick Saldiveri? Or do you go with Shane Lemieux at center, get to keep Lucas Patrick at left guard, and then right guard can be Saldiveri, Landon Young, or Oli Udoh? The Saints have options. For them, it is imperative that they figure out the best combination on that offensive line that gets this team to be as good as possible. And that's on Quinn Kubiak. That's on coaching this week to make the proper adjustments. We saw last week against the Eagles. They got banged up pretty bad in the trenches. They need to find a way to at least look competent in the trenches this week. And if they can't do that, it's going to be another long game. If they're able to kind of minimize the damage, though, I think this offense is going to be able to get back on track, and we'll see more of what we saw in the first 2 weeks as opposed to what we saw in week 3. So we'll see what happens for the Saints, but with injuries piling up, got to make sure your makeshift offensive line at least keeps your quarterback healthy and gets some semblance of a run game, because obviously they didn't have that last week, and that hurt them big time. So I mentioned it before. This is one of the biggest games on the Saints schedule. It's not just that it's Saints-Falcons. Look at the way the teams are trending going into this game. Look at what the Saints schedule is right now. It's really important. But it's not just important for the Saints. It's obviously important for their head coach, Dennis Allen. And I posed the question this week, and it brings us to our, which we do every single week, brings us to our tweet of the week presented by Standard Mortgage, where I talked about Dennis Allen. Once again, as I mentioned, our tweet of the week brought to you by Standard Mortgage, your local lender for life, when you can get in touch with a home loan expert today at 504-569-3902. I said, not trying to be hyperbolic, but would a win for Dennis Allen this Sunday be the biggest one of his head coaching career? They could be missing multiple key starters, but they got a chance to improve to 3-1 overall and 2-0 in the division. So all that on the table for Dennis Allen. Could this be the biggest game so far of his Saints career and a chance for him to get the biggest win? I think the answer is undoubtedly yes for Dennis Allen. I know that might sound crazy. It's week 4, Chris. How can this be the biggest win of his career? Dennis Allen's never started 3-1 as a head coach in his NFL career. He's never started 3-1 with the Saints, obviously, if I mention that stat. The Saints have a chance to go 2-0 already in the NFC South. You only play 6 division games. To get 2 out of the way quickly, that's going to pay dividends down the road. That's going to give you confidence when you're playing against your divisional opponents later on. A big road win would be huge for them. Would improve their NFC record to 3-1. Their overall record would be 3-1. But I think for Dennis Allen, what's important is you change the perception around the team. If the Saints go into Atlanta and they lose and they're 2-2, a lot of people are going to say, same old Saints. You started 2-2. Now you lose back-to-back games. You can't beat quality opponents. But if you go out there with key players missing and find a way on the road against the odds to beat the Falcons, improve to 3-1, and show that you bounced back from that Eagles game, this will feel like a different team. And I think that's so important for the Saints early in the season to start passing these tests. The Cowboys game was a test. Could you handle a team that's made the playoffs? Saints handled them. And then you played the Eagles, and that was another test. How do you play after a big win? And the Saints, unfortunately, failed that test. Here's another test for Dennis Allen, for Clint Kubiak. You just lost to the Eagles in heartbreaking fashion. You're going to be down a couple of key players. How do you respond against your biggest rival in the Falcons, who at 1-2, they're trying to get back to 500. They're trying to make sure they're still, the talk of the NFC South. And the Saints have a golden opportunity here, not just to improve their own record, but kick Atlanta while they're down. You got to strike while the iron's hot. You got to kick them while they're down and improve to 3-1 and knock the Falcons to 1-3. So again, I know it's week 4, and it seems crazy to say that this game, if they win, would be the biggest one of Dennis Allen's career so far. But I think that's the truth. I really do. Part of it comes down to DA hasn't coached in a lot of big games, and the Saints just haven't been a contender with him. But the other part is just looking at the schedule for the Saints. 3-1 going into that Kansas City game feels a lot better than if you're 2-2 going into that Monday night matchup. Promise me. And I know you guys probably feel the same way, at least about that aspect. So I think for the Saints, it's imperative to go out there, get this win, debunk a lot of narratives about this team, quiet some of the noise. And if they go out there and beat Atlanta on the road, I think that for me, I would feel more like, man, this is a playoff team than it isn't. Now, again, a loss doesn't mean the Saints are out of it. That doesn't mean that I start slamming the panic button, relentlessly. But you'll be 2-2, then going into Kansas City and Tampa Bay. And things look a little bit tougher than they would if you're 3-1 and you're feeling good about the overall vibe of the team. So I do think it's the biggest game of Dennis Allen's career. I would love to know what you guys think about it. So let me know in the comments, and I'll get to your thoughts in just a minute. But I think this is going to be a huge game for the Saints. That being said, I mentioned your comments. We'll get to that in just a couple minutes. Before we do, I want to get a quick word from one of our sponsors, Scott Fickner.
And Jonathan Williams brings it all the way back from the 20-yard line.
What a terrific way to end the first half.
And tonight's game is brought to you by Scott Fickner Injury Attorneys. They always fight for the win.
You mean attorney? It's one lawyer. Scott Fickner?
No, there's 2.
Brad Scott and David Fickner.
Well, it's confusing.
That it is. They could have picked a better name.
Scott Fickner, Injury Attorneys, we fight for the win.
Once again, thank you, Scott Fickner, for being part of the program. We greatly appreciate it. Saints Falcons week, as we mentioned before, injuries are piling up. The Saints, obviously, a chance to go to 3-1. Big opportunity here for Dennis Allen. There's going to be so much talk about this game, especially about protecting the two quarterbacks in Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr and how their injured offensive lines hold up. I think one thing for the Saints and why it is so important to get that protection for Derek Carr is I think Chris Olave is having the best season of his career that no one's going to be able to talk about because he's not getting enough targets. And that seems weird to complain about when the Saints are 2-1 and we've seen the ground game come back to life and we're so excited about certain things that they are doing on offense. But when you look at Chris Olave right now, he's got 12 catches for 178 yards and a touchdown. But it's about all the advanced metrics. Every advanced metric in terms of yards after the catch, in terms of separation created on his routes, Olave's towards the top of the charts. There was one in particular this week from Pro Football Focus. It was their separation grade for the 2024 season. And they put out a graph. Chris Olave is literally away from the competition. Absolutely away. Now, is that a knock on Derek Carr? Is it a knock on Kubiak? No, I don't think it's a knock on any of those guys. What I would say, though, is for the Saints, as well as they've run the football, with the O-line being a little bit more banged up, you might have to go to some quick hitters. You might have to go to a higher volume passing game than you have the last 3 weeks. And if that happens, I think it's the perfect opportunity to feed Chris Olave, who has done the dirty work this season. He's blocking his ass off. He's helping out in the run game. You got to reward those guys. And I think this could be a good week to go to it. Like I mentioned, you're down Ruiz, you're down McCoy. You might have to have a couple of quick passes. And I think Chris Olave is the perfect option to go to because I do think he's ready to take that next step as a receiver. Again, 14 targets through 3 games is not enough for a player of his caliber. That number needs to shoot up. And again, I don't want to kind of knock the Saints offense. Through 3 weeks, they've been great in 2 of them. And that's a good number. If you tell me for 2/3 of the Saints season, they'll be great on offense, I'm not going to complain about who's getting what targets. But they need this passing game to kind of take that next step because I don't think they'll be as dominant in the trenches without McCoy and Ruiz. And I think it's Olave's time to shine. I really do. So for this Falcons game, that's a guy that I'm keying in on. I think this is the perfect moment for Chris Olave to have that statement game. I really felt like he was going to have it against the Eagles. And he still had a really good game, right? Had the go-ahead touchdown in the fourth quarter, had 80 yards, really looked great out there. But it wasn't that game that everyone's kind of looking at the box score and going, well, goddamn, Chris Olave ate today. And I think this is the game for him to do such. And we'll see what happens. I mean, we just saw what Rashee Rice did. I know they're different receivers. Rashee, I'd say, is more physical after the catch than Chris is. But we just saw Rashee Rice have success against the Falcons. I could see Chris Olave doing the same thing for the Saints. And again, I think this is going to be a close game. And I think that for both teams, obviously injury is going to play a factor, especially when you're banged up in the trenches. I just like where the Saints are heading right now. And I know that sounds crazy to say coming off a loss. And maybe I'll eat my words. Maybe I'll be wrong. I just feel good about the Saints going into this game, despite the injuries. And I don't know how to explain it. I really don't. Maybe it's Taysom Hill coming back because he is expected to play. He's been a full participant. And the Falcons never have an answer for Taysom Hill. But I just have a weird feeling that the Saints are going to be okay. And I know there's like a little bit of a negative vibe right now because of the injuries and you're coming off the loss. And there is that kind of doubt that sets in, right? Like, is it the same Saints from the last 2 seasons? I don't know. I haven't had it yet. And maybe my mentality changes. Maybe the Saints kind of wet the bed against Atlanta. They're 2-2. And all of a sudden I'm like, maybe this is last year again, just with a little bit of a paint job to it. I don't know. I feel like the Saints will go into Atlanta and, despite the injuries, find a way to pull it out. I think guys like Carl Granderson are going to have to play a big role. Brian Brzee was tremendous last week. If he can replicate that again against an Atlanta team that's going to miss their starting center, I like where that bodes. And then for the other side of the ball for Atlanta, I talk about the Saints being banged up on the offensive line. Atlanta's defense, don't get me wrong, safety play's been good. Like their secondary's done good work. They've been really good in the red zone at times. They're not the pass rushing type of team. So maybe for New Orleans, granted you'll be missing guys, maybe you'll still be able to let those long plays develop where you could take a shot downfield to Rashid Shaheed and maybe one of those hits. So, call it stupid. I think the Saints win by a field goal in Atlanta, and that's just kind of where I'm at right now. I just like the vibe of this team a little more. I think the Falcons are getting better week to week, but they're still trying to find themselves too. And I think NFC South game, you know what you're to expect. Saints have done it last year. They blew out the Falcons once, and then the other one, it seemed like they had full control, and Derek Carr throws that pick 6, changes the complete momentum of the game. Chance for him to go back into Atlanta, redeem himself a little bit, and get this team to 3-1. I think getting to that mark would change a whole awful lot for this team. So it's up to them, and we'll see if they can do it. So as promised, guys, I said, if you have any comments, thoughts, predictions, concerns about this game, put them into the chat. You can still put it in the chat, and I'll pull all of them up from now, because we're going to get into our Q&A presented by Sunshine, your hometown John Deere. Nothing runs like a deer. Let's get into some stuff. We have a super chat from Michael Morgan. Thank you for the support. We greatly appreciate it here. We're going to get into Cooler Beat saying going to be another messy game, but the Saints have to find a way to win. We see other teams do it without key starters. DA has to prove he can do it too. Yeah, I think this is a huge test, obviously, for Dennis Allen. And that's why I mentioned before, guys, it sounds crazy to say a week 4 game for a team that's 2-1 could be the biggest game of the coach's career. But I really do. I feel like the pendulum swings on what happens in this game. I'm telling you, if the Saints go to 3-1, it's a different conversation about this team. It just is. 2-0 in the division, being able to handle yourself on the road, they would be 2-0 on the road, which would be great too. I just feel like the vibe is different going into that Monday night game. You just feel like you're better off going into it, whether it's 2-2. I don't know. It does have that, here's 2023 again. Because remember, Saints started off 2-0 last year, and then it all came crashing down. So it's crazy to say that this game dictates so much, but I really feel like it does. So a great opportunity for DA here to kind of quiet down some of the concerns. And if you can't do it, then obviously those are going to be, taken up a notch. Michael says Falcons down their center and right tackle as well, so we have to show up. I think it's a big part about it too, right? Like, don't get me wrong, Saints are banged up, and it's not just the O-line. Could miss Demario Davis. We'll see Alvin's status, though I kind of feel like Alvin's going to play. But Falcons are down offensive linemen. Falcons are still trying to figure themselves out. Kirk Cousins is getting better week to week, but he still doesn't look like Kirk Cousins of last year, who prior to his injury was actually playing like some of the best football of his career. So I feel like injury-wise, I don't know if it's a level playing field, but it's not like a huge difference between teams. Atlanta being down 2 offensive linemen, us being down 2 offensive linemen is kind of, at least from the trenches standpoint, it's kind of the same. Jack says, Taysom Hill has always had great games versus the Falcons. Hope that continues. Yeah, Taysom's been tremendous for New Orleans, especially when they play in these games. And he gets the rivalry. He understands what it's all about. We've seen him have touchdown passes against the Falcons. We've seen him have rushing touchdowns. We've seen him block punts. So he's done it all against his team. We've seen him win as the starting quarterback. So Taysom's going to be paramount to this team. And that's a big part, maybe another reason why, and maybe it's foolish of me, I feel good about this game. I think Taysom Hill being in the lineup will give the Saints a little bit more flexibility on offense. And they need that, whether it's in the ground game, whether it's the run blocking. Because, Foster Moreau, I thought had a rough week run blocking last Sunday. Taysom could come in and immediately improve that. So Taysom's return, that's going to be huge for the Saints. And I just think he gives you another weapon at your disposal, which they're going to need. You're going to need all those playmakers to step up and really, really chip in, especially with the O-line not being at 100%. So hopefully Taysom's got another big Falcons game in him. And if there is one in him, now's the time to unleash it this Sunday. Jerry G says, who dat, Chris? Despite the injuries, the Saints are still winning Sunday. No excuses. Yeah, I mean, I feel like for the Saints, we can't do the no excuse. I agree with you. There is no excuses. Injuries are part of the game. Everyone is hurt right now. Every team, it feels like, is hurt. So I'm excited to see how they handle this challenge. Like I said, last week was a test. You can make an argument that they failed that test. I think that would be the fair thing to say. And you got another opportunity to make good for this team. So we'll see what happens. But just like you, Jerry, I feel oddly good about this game. And I know they're not at 100%. I know they're missing guys, but I feel like the Saints are going to find a way to pull it out. I really do. Who dat to that says, Olave not getting wide receiver 1 touch is insane to me. It's been 3 years. At some point, you have to turn him into what you picked him top of the first to be. Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to say. I think now is the time, to your point. So we'll see. I think he looks great. When you rewatch the games, he's getting open. He's making the most out of his opportunities. To your point, though, and I think it's an excellent point, when is the time to cut him loose? I think it's now. You got to let Olave be that guy. And Alvin's banged up. Taysom's coming back off an injury. We've mentioned it a million times. Run game is probably not going to be as dominant because you don't have your full starting 5 at O-line. This is the game. 7 catches for Olave. Like, this would be the one to unleash him. Jack says a lot of the NFL was hurt, sadly, right now. It really proves who has the best coaches to manage what they have remaining, like the 49ers. Yeah, Niners, Rams, like, they have great coaches. So when they get hurt, yeah, it stinks. But there's almost like this sense of, all right, their coach is going to be able to navigate through it. You don't feel that with Dennis Allen because Dennis Allen hasn't shown it. Dennis Allen goes out there, beats the Falcons. It's one game, but the narrative surrounding that question, it starts to shift a little bit in the right direction for once. Why is Kendra even still on my team, man? LOL, we could have traded for or signed another available running back by now. He doesn't play, and Jamal can give you locker room quotes. Yeah, I mean, for Kendra, he can't play. This is the last game he technically is required to miss since he was placed on IR. He can be back for week 5 against the Chiefs. Kendra Miller, to me, is going to be one of the most important players moving forward for this team this season. And I know that sounds crazy. It's like, Chris, he never plays. But that's my point. If Kendra Miller comes back and he is healthy, and it's a big if because we haven't seen shit from him in terms of being healthy, he will give this offense another dynamic. He will take a lot of the workload off of Alvin. And Alvin can be that 15 to 18 touches a game running back who kills you in those 18 touches as opposed to running him 26 times like you did against Philly last week. And I think you mentioned Jamal Williams. Jamal, great pass blocking running back, but you don't play guys at running back strictly because they're good pass blockers. I'm being kind and mentioning that because Jamal hasn't shown that he can do anything else for the Saints other than pass block. So Kendra Miller will give them another running back who can play physical, who can make those one cuts and run downhill and give the Saints 10, 15 yards after, passing the line of scrimmage. So I think Kendra can be that second part of the backfield duo that the Saints are looking for. But the problem is he's got to stay healthy, and he hasn't shown it. He hasn't proven it. But that's why the Saints have been patient with him, because deep down they know this kid is super talented. But you can't see that talent because he's never on the field. So wishful thinking is that starting next Monday, well, not next Monday, 2 Mondays from now, he'll be back in the fold, and that'll be the start of Kendra Miller having a sophomore season that none of us expected because we didn't expect anything from him this year. But he's got to come out and prove it. And I really hope that is the case where Kendra does have that type of year, but it's tough to have a lot of confidence in him right now because we haven't seen anything. But make no mistake about it, he is definitely good enough to play in this league, but teams won't care if you're not available. Not to get off topic, but who do you have winning tonight's Thursday night football matchup? I got Dallas in a close one. I don't think Dallas is as bad as they've looked the last 2 weeks. I don't think they're anywhere where they were last year. I think their defense has taken obviously a massive step back, and I think teams are starting to realize, well, you can just run at Dallas, and all of a sudden you're controlling time possession, and they're playing from behind, which is forcing them to impress. But I just don't think New York has the elite players on offense to run up the score the way the Saints did 2 weeks ago and the way the Ravens did last week. Malik Neighbors is a dog, and Devin Singletary's been solid, but they don't have enough guys to really take full control of that matchup. Now, if the Giants win, would that surprise me? No, but I think Dallas wins, let's say 24-20, around that score. After seeing that touchdown scoring drive, I have faith in Clint and his offense. It was a good bit of 3 wide receiver sets, and everybody and their mama knew Olave was getting the ball, yet he was constantly wide open. Yeah, and that's a good point about, what we were talking about before with unleashing Olave. He's getting open. He's making plays. Now's the time to cut him loose and let him do his thing. I think this is the perfect week for it to happen, especially because you're not going to be able to run the football at will as you had the first 2 weeks of the year. Time to get the passing game going a little bit more. Ed with the super chat here. Thank you for the support, Ed. He says, is Cam Jordan still on the team? LOL. Why don't they stick him inside? Also, we needed a third receiver to step up. What happened to A.T. Perry? All great questions. So let's go through them. Obviously, we all know Cam Jordan's still on the team, but to your point, he's not playing a lot. And Dennis Allen mentioned it this week, and it was one of the more blunt yet brutally honest quotes from him where he just admit Cam's not on the field as much as people are used to seeing Cam on the field because he's not making as big of an impact. And for the Saints, they got to play the guys out there who's going to make it. And Carl Granderson's obviously been tremendous for them. But they believe they're getting enough from Chase Young, and I do think Chase Young is on the verge of having that breakout game. Maybe it's this Sunday against the Falcons. So for Cam, I agree with you. I would love to see them use him inside a little bit more. I guess it's all relative, though, to what they're getting out of guys like Brian Brzee, but I thought they would have tried to go Brzee and Cam on the inside with Granderson and Chase Young on the outside, kind of for that NASCAR package and go after the passer like that, but haven't really seen that much. But it is Falcons week. If there's ever a time for Cam to step up, it would be this one. But, Father Time catches everyone. Unfortunately for Cam, he looks like just another guy out there. And it sucks to say because he's a Saints legend, but it is the truth. As for the receiver part, I couldn't agree more. And that's why I've been kind of banging the drum for, I think the Saints need to go add more talent. A.T. Perry is not that third receiver we're all hoping he would be. And for New Orleans, they got to make a decision on him because they're obviously frustrated with the lack of day-to-day consistency at practice. And that's why he's not playing, guys. It comes down to practice. They don't like what they're seeing from him in practice. It's been a thing that they have said multiple times. This has been a problem for the Saints since July with A.T. Perry. And this is why you're not seeing him on the field. It's frustrating because I thought A.T. Perry made some big plays at the end of last season. And I think he could give this offense another weapon. But they just don't like the way he's practicing Monday to Friday, or in this case, Wednesday to Friday, technically. And because of that, they don't feel confident trusting him on Sunday, even though we've seen him play well on Sundays. It's a shame because A.T. Perry can play in this league, but that's the truth of the matter. That's why we're not seeing him out there, and it's frustrating. Will says, if we lose, how do you feel going forward, panic meter-wise? Depends how they lose. They get blown out. I don't know, probably not feeling great. They lose another heartbreaker, but you know what? Fuck it. I'm not into moral wins and losses. They lose. I think, the panic rises a little bit. How much? I don't know, because let's say they lose to Kansas City, then come back around and beat Tampa, and they're 3-3 heading into that Thursday night game against Denver. You still feel like, hey, you can win. You can make it to the playoffs. And it would be still be so early in the season where like 2-2 doesn't kill you. But I just want them to win this one so bad. Besides the fact that it's the Falcons, I just think getting to 3-1, feeling better about this team would be huge. So panic meter wise, I'd put myself, because right now, panic meter wise, I am at a 0. I can't panic after a 2-1 start through 3 games. But they lose this one, maybe it goes up to a 4. I'll put it up to a 3 or a 4. Let's be real about this DA talk. We know the defense is going to do its job. It's been doing its job since DA's been there. It's Clint that needs to prove himself Sunday, and I think he will. Great challenge for Clint. Also, great comment, by the way. I do appreciate that. Clint's going to have an opportunity now to go out there and show, can he respond well to what I thought a lackluster showing from him from a play calling perspective against the Eagles. We need another wide receiver, 2 or 3, bad, because not a single person has stepped up, and we get nothing from our tight ends. It's a fair point. You know what you're getting out of Olave and Shaheed. Obviously, Alvin's a beast. But Jawan hasn't been that guy that we thought he could be 2 years ago. He hasn't gotten any better, at least production-wise. Taysom's a great playmaker, but Taysom's like an interesting playmaker. You can't use him the way you use all those other guys. Wide receiver-wise, Mason Tipton's your wide receiver 3 at times. Cedric Wilson is also that wide receiver 3 at times. You can't rely on either one of those. So I think, to me, and I mentioned it before, I would go add another weapon. If the Saints are in contention and they feel like, hey, playoff spot's viable, I would go see if there's a wide receiver for rent that you don't have to give up a lucrative draft pick for and add them to this roster. I agree. If we win this game, we're in good shape before Kansas City. Need to stay 2 to 3 games above 500 until McCoy gets back. Yeah, ideally that would be the key, because I think towards the middle and later half of the Saints season, I think they could really go on a run, which Dennis Allen's teams the last 2 years play their best football in December. So you want to at least be minimum 500 or better than 500 to when the Saints hit that point where they win, 4 out of 5 games like they have the last 2 years with Dennis Allen. That would be the ideal situation. But obviously it's easier said than done. Gabriel says, I agree with you. I feel this game will determine our stance in the division and make a true statement for the Saints. Yeah, I know it sounds crazy. I just feel like they get to 3-1. I'm going to feel awfully confident about this team. If they get to 2-2, then you go into Kansas City and you're kind of hoping and praying they could squeak out a win there. Just Call Me Trey says, like most games will be this year, can the Saints control the line of scrimmage by running the ball and protecting Carr? Kubiak needs a bounce-back game. Also, can the defense stop the run? Yeah, great questions. For defense stopping the run, they're going to need that to happen. Bijan, who is banged up, by the way, is on the injury report with a shoulder injury. He's such an integral part, obviously, to what the Falcons do. And we've seen the Saints struggle at times with Bijan. We've also seen them have success. How you play against him and whether you can slow him down changes a lot, because Kyle Pitts is not the weapon that the Falcons once thought he was. Drake London's a good receiver, but Drake London isn't that guy that goes for the 60, 70-yard touchdown. Maybe he proves me wrong, on Sunday, but he's just not that type of playmaker. So for the Saints, I think a lot of it comes down to stopping the run, as you mentioned with Bijan, no doubt about it. And if you can do that and make them one-dimensional, that opens those opportunities to rush the passer in Kirk Cousins, who's not mobile and is going to be without 2 starting offensive linemen. So I think it's a great opportunity there. Kubiak earns his money this week and against the Bucs. Yeah, I do agree. Divisional games are going to be paramount for the Saints team, guys. As much as we want them to win every game, the truth of the matter is, for the NFC South, and pretty much for every division, not just the NFC South, you take care of your divisional opponents, you're going to be in great shape. You're going to put yourself in position to win and make it to the playoffs. So Saints got to control what's in front of them, and 2 out of the next 3 games are going to be against the NFC South. So an outstanding opportunity for this team to go out there and make some noise. Ed with another super chat. Thank you so much for the support. Ed says, Alvin can't carry the ball 26 times. It's too much. It is too much. That's not the best version to get out of Alvin. We all know that. On top of that, the 26 carries, I mean, Alvin took a lot of shots in that Eagles game, and then go figure, he's got a hip and rib injury, and he's on the injury report. So you're kind of banging up your best weapon. You know that's not the best version of Alvin. I always say the best version of Alvin's like somewhere to 15 to 18 carries and like 4 receptions. To me, if you get him 18, 20 touches over the course of a game, running and receiving, I think that's the best version of Alvin. And I think for the Saints, when you just run him 26 times into the teeth of that Vic Fangio defense like they did last Sunday, that just felt like a Pete Carmichael-esque game plan for the Saints. And that part kind of frustrated me because we've seen better out of Kubiak, and that just wasn't his best performance, I would say, so far, Pablo says, I don't know if you saw the tweet put out by Jeff Duncan regarding Trey Hendrickson, but do you think Mickey Loomis regrets doubling down on Marcus Davenport and squandering picks? Yeah, probably. I mean, now that you know how it all played out, yeah, I'd say you'd have your regrets. I mean, every team's got regrets in this league, but yeah, when you see it play out like this, I think you can officially say, yeah, that was a whiff, and that's okay. I mean, teams whiff all the time. It stinks for us fans because Trey's way better than Davenport, obviously, and Davenport's body for the poor guy just keeps failing him. But yeah, I think it's safe to say we could call it a whiff. Our issue versus the Falcons for 3 years has been stopping the run, which we cannot allow this season with Bijan because the way Saquon dashed that second half was disgusting. Yeah, and part of that was, I think, time of possession. I think that Saints defense got run down, and that's why it is imperative that they don't have a similar, game script as they had last week because they had that defense on the field for way too long, and you just felt like, yeah, they're making stops, but at some point, that Eagles O-line is going to open up a big enough lane for Saquon to make the big play. And lo and behold, there it goes. And Saquon takes off for a 50-plus yard touchdown, and that kind of just changes the whole complexion of the game. Ed says, man, the O-line got destroyed that last game, and if the same shit happens this game against the Falcons, and if the same shit happens this game versus the Falcons, going to be in the backfield. Udo was terrible. Ruiz was worse than terrible. Yeah, Ruiz was god-awful. And the funny part is we had Oli Udo and Ruiz run into each other on that one play, which was kind of a great depiction of what that game was for the Saints. Just another shit show. One Smoke says, I'm not giving up on Kendre. Neither am I, at least not for this season. We don't play this season, then we could give up. But I'm not giving up this season. I think the Saints are going to need him at some point. Hakeem says, the O-line is the key to any success we have Sunday against the Falcons. I agree on that. Thoughts on Michael Parsons defending the Saints against C.J. Gardner-Johnson? I don't know. Like, part of me is like, I agree with Micah. The other part of me is like, if I was in Micah's shoes and the Cowboys are struggling right now, I don't know if I would go out there and I get it. He's like contractually obligated to do his podcast. So I know everyone rips him for his podcast, but like, I get, it is another job for him. It's a little hustle. I don't think he's bad at it, but it's weird. Like, the Cowboys are struggling right now. So I don't know if him talking about the Eagles is the smartest thing in the world. On the other hand, I do agree with him that, it's crazy for CJ to be talking a lot when, in my opinion, he nearly cost the Eagles the game with his poor coverage in the secondary. So it's a weird balance, It's clear that the 2025 draft will be O-line and tight end / wide receiver focused. Yeah, I would go get more weapons for this offense. I mean, yeah, if you could get an offensive guard, go get another offensive guard. But Saints need a tight end. They need another wide receiver. Maybe need another running back, depending on what they decide to do with Alvin. So they better go in on offense. And when you think that you're done, a little bit more offense. T-Ray says Saints should go after Devontae Adams. All relative to where they're at. All relative to where they're at in the season. Cam Jordan is the OG that has now let the youngsters carry him instead of it being the other way around. That is fair. Hoodie Juby says, go after Hunter Renfrow in free agency, Devontae Adams, or D-Hop in a trade, or just let Perry play. Yeah, I mean, I would love to see them let A.T. Perry play and see if like the whole thing where A.T. Perry just stinks in practice and is great in games comes to fruition again. But I guess we'll never know. Ed says, man, if you look at the all-22, Shaheed burned those corners and Carr had no time to get him the rock. Olave should have had about 125 last week because he was open and Carr had no time. Damn O-line. Yeah, that's why a lot of people are like, oh, well, are you going to blame Derek Carr for the game? When Derek Carr stinks, I'll say Derek Carr stinks. It is tough to do things in this league when you're snapping the ball. It's play action. Your back's the defense. The minute you turn around, there are 2 defenders right in your face. It's just hard to do. There were so many plays that got blown up immediately. So I think if the Saints can hold up for Carr, They will scheme guys open, just like they schemed guys open last week. But O-line's got to do their job. Rosenfield says, A.T. Perry likely isn't a good run blocker or he's struggling to adjust to the scheme. It could be a little mixture of both for them. Could be a focus issue. Like, there's so many issues that can go into play that we might not know of what's going behind the scenes. But clearly they're frustrated of what he's doing on a consistency basis day to day, and that's why he's not seeing the field. AK-41 can't hold up with his high usage rate for the entire season. Hope Miller brings some relief as well as depth. I totally agree. That's my hope. Will says, how long do you think they'll stick with the run if it isn't working? Hopefully don't see 30 carries again. Yeah, I think you got to you don't abandon the run, but they were so stubborn with running the football last week that it's frustrating. They cannot be as stubborn this week. They just can't. You got to make that switch quicker. Is Foskey better than Turner? I would still prefer Peyton Turner, but I'd like one of them to step up. That would be my preference. One of them step up and be an impact player. We need young players like Perry, Orji, Kool-Aid, Saldivari, and Miller to step in and contribute. I don't disagree with that. They definitely do. Turner getting the same amount of snaps as Cam is telling on how Cam's role will be going forward. I agree. Like, the days of Cam being that guy are over. It stinks, but it's the truth. Ed says, guess who's out for the season? Mr. Half a Sack, Marcus Davenport. Yeah, at this point, I feel bad for her. The guy's body is just broken down completely. Trey says, need to draft another Trey Hendrickson next year because they're going O-line again, first round. Yeah, they might. I mean, if a guard's there that they like, I could see it. But they do need to get another defensive end at this rate. Unless Chase Young is the guy they want to commit to and you got the money committed to Young and Granderson, you still at some point got to get a defensive end later on in the draft. So hopefully they can hit on that. Atlanta had success with the outside zone run versus the Eagles because Atlanta spread out the Eagles' defense with split out tight ends, running backs, and multiple wide receiver set, and they ran from those formations. Kubiak rarely did it versus the Eagles. I forgot who had the overhead shot of the formation, kind of six guys on the line and then the one linebacker behind him. And that formation is pretty much what Fangio just kept throwing at the Saints, and they just kept running right into the teeth of that defense. And I couldn't stop laughing. Like, I felt like we're watching a game from last season this past weekend. That's what it felt like. We should go after D-Hop or find a way to pair Carr with Adams for this year. Seems to be a popular suggestion going on. I think that we're seeing the reason AT fell in the draft that was never answered reveal itself in real time. That's a very good point, because remember when he fell, everyone's like, man, the production at Wake Forest was off the charts. Why is he falling all the way to day 3 and late day 3? And maybe we got our answer. So before I come back with our closing argument, guys, I just want to get a quick word from one of our sponsors, DraftKings Sportsbook.
TD, Tutty, taking it to the house, whatever you call a touchdown. They matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Ready to place your first NFL bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? To do so, you have to score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code BOOT. That's code BOOT, BOOT, for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms.
Once again, thank you to DraftKings for being part of the program. We greatly appreciate it. Before we get into the end of it, I'll just bring up a couple more comments we had to see. Hoodie Juby said, man, screw it, bring back MT. And then Isaac said, MT didn't do anything but poison the locker room and warm the bench. If getting a receiver, get one that will actually play and make a difference. Yeah, I mean, look, from MT, I don't think they'll ever go back to him. I think that lines were crossed and that bridge was burnt, and it's a shame, but I think that's just where we're at with that situation. What I will say for the Saints is, though, I would like them to be proactive and look around for more help offensively. I think they could use it, and, oh, man, I just don't think this offense has enough juice. They got to go out there and add a little bit more. So That brings us to, guys, our closing arguments presented by Scott Fickner. I said it before in the middle of the show, and I'll say it again. I think this is a tremendous opportunity for Dennis Allen to go out there with a banged-up roster, improve yourself to 3-1, change the vibe around the building, get people to believe that this is a different Saints team than what we've seen the last 2 years, and no better opportunity to go out there and beat your biggest rival on their home turf with less than 100% strength. I think that'd be paramount for the Saints. How do you make it happen? Got to find a way to make that makeshift O-line look competent enough for Derek Carr to go out there and get those plays to Shaheed and Olave that they're capable of, that they'll be able to scheme open. And then for defense, I think it's going to come down and putting pressure on Kirk Cousins. If you can slow down Bijan and put all of this game on a Kirk Cousins who isn't at 100% yet, still seems like he's favoring that leg, I think that's a great opportunity for the Saints to go out there and win this game. I think it's going to be a close one. Something tells me the Saints pull it out and win by 3. I think this is going to be a nail-biting game. I think it's going to be intense, as most Falcons-Saints games are, and I can't wait to see it unfold. As always, guys, we're going to have our halftime show powered by 4D during that game, and then have our post-game live stream, so hopefully you guys will be around to chat about the Saints when we do those. And if you guys want to stay in touch for those, subscribe to Boot Crew Media and stay tuned for more content from the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for Who Dat Nation.